Hello, I'm Remington Hernandez here at the Startup Society Summit in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It was a wonderful time. This is the final day. It has just ended. We're here for Bold Future News, and I'm joined by Thibault Serlet, who is the founder of the Startup Society's organization. Now, Thibault, you put together this organization and this summit. Can you tell me why you did?
Sure. So I was talking to a few people who were telling me about the Free State Project and about seasteading and Liberland, and I realized that there were all of these attempts by sort of freedom-oriented people at creating new societies, but that none of the organizers of these attempts were aware of each other, they knew about each other's existence. So Doug Casey once said in an interview that he wished that somebody would create an international organization of all of the micro-societies. So I liked his idea. I got him on the phone. He liked the idea. 6 months later, Startup Societies was a reality.
Now, were there any obstacles in bringing the summit to Portsmouth, or just having the summit in general? Because this is a big undertaking, and from the start, I'm sure you had some concerns or maybe just a few problems.
So this was my first conference ever, so nothing went as planned, and that's okay because it was my first. And next summit is going to be, we're going to gradually try to escalate the scale of each successive summit. My long-term goal is to have a big sort of Comic-Con style convention like in Las Vegas or something, but start small, go big.
Start small, go big. That's a central message of startup societies. And the entire concept of a startup society is starting from the ground up and building out. Now, one thing you focused on is not just countries here, but special economic zones. Could you go into that some more?
So actually, before I go into that, I'd like to say that there's multiple types of startup societies that we've identified. The most obvious are separatist nations. So, for example, the Scottish who want to secede, they're a very famous example of a separatist nation, or Catalonia, Venice, Flanders, Bavaria. So those are the people who actually want to make new countries, even Liberland. Then there's people who just don't want to make any independence, who don't want any sovereignty, and that's sort of like a private city. So an example would be Fort Galt in Chile. That's a private city. But my personal favorite type of startup society, the one that I think is the most viable, is a special economic zone. And the idea is that a nation that has a bunch of very restrictive laws takes a piece of land or a city or an area and decides to exempt that area from its city, from most laws and most regulations and so forth. So China has something like 300 or 400 special economic zones, depending on how you count it, more than 1,000. And really, China's special economic zones are how they escaped from communism. So they said, okay, sure, we don't have property rights, we have high taxes, you can't fire, you can't hire people easily, but in these zones you can. So as a result, the nation as a whole has become a much freer place.
So these startup societies, there have been many in the past. You had several different speakers who spoke on them. How many have succeeded? Could you tell us that?
Sure. So the definition of a startup society is pretty broad. It's, an artificial attempt at creating a new society to test political principles. So this has been done from the very beginning of human history. And if you look at the United States, actually, the United States were people who left Europe because they wanted more religious freedom, more economic freedom, and the United States itself is an example of a startup society. Another very successful startup society, for example, would be Monaco. Monaco is sort of this little city-state between Italy and France, or you could see even the Roman Empire as a startup society, the Holy Roman Empire in Germany. So historically, there's been plenty of successful startup societies, and for every successful startup society, there's 100 or 1,000 complete disasters.
So the complete disasters are kind of a central message, because there have been complete disasters. One speaker spoke of Project Atlantis, where they tried to have a startup society. It's very unknown, but he did the research. He went through all of the rigmarole to find out about it. But there's certain ways that you can go about that you can fail. I guess that's why this conference exists, is to start and learn how to stay away from failing, or help to try not to fail. Do you think that this conference, this summit, and this organization will eventually have its own startup society or help further some other startup society?
So the Seasteading Institute made a very big mistake, and they actually bought a boat and tried to seastead themselves, and it took a lot of their time and energy away. And really, when the Seasteading Institute was making a lot of headway, was by building the community, and all of these big tech companies and independent entrepreneurs started building their own seasteads. So although I would personally be interested in starting my own startup society and have ideas about how that could be done, that is not the scope of startup societies. The scope of startup societies is, as you said, to establish best practices, to see what works. And I probably am in contact with maybe 30 or 40 startup societies across 4 continents. And of those, I think that within 10 years, maybe 2 or 3 will survive and 1 will prosper, and the rest will all fall apart.
Now, this conference spread over 3 days, several hours, and many different people, many interesting people from across the world spoke. Who was your personal favorite, and who do you think was most interesting?
So the most interesting talk, I thought, was Joe Quirk of the Seasteading Institute, because he gave a very good overview of the idea as a whole, and he also, in addition to that, made an extremely convincing case as to the technological and social viability of seasteading. So, for example, he says that he points out that a cruise ship are so large that you can have, ice skating rinks and operas. So, if you can have that, light manufacturing isn't too much of a leap. Or the boats that are bigger than the Empire State Building, and I never thought of the scale of it before.
Now, some of our viewers may think that these startup societies would never work. Our societies right now are working, or they don't think that they're necessarily working, but they think it's too ambitious to try to start something new because most of the world is already claimed. What do you have to say to those people?
Well, I would say that a lot of the societies that work today were once at a time startup societies that have simply grown and become, the establishment. So if you look at the really functional places on Earth right now, Europe, America, Asia, I mean, these are places that have histories that are packed with startup societies. And most of the Earth is actually unclaimed. Most of the Earth is sea. And there's a piece of land the size of the United States in the South Pole that is still unclaimed. There's the stars, the moon, the solar system, and some countries which are already in existence. Most land in the world is actually wasteland. Most of it's desert, most of it's forest. Most of it's really cold. So there's still 95% of the surface of the Earth is still ready for startup societies, and our population is going to grow a lot. And we're going to have to address that growth. And I don't think, nuclear war is a solution. I think startup societies is a solution.
Now, we had a few startup societies here that came on to speak, some newer ones, Liberland, for example, and we spoke with Gabriel Scheer from Fort Galt. Which of the startup societies, currently the newer ones, do you think is the most ambitious, and which one do you think will work the best?
So the most ambitious is certainly Liberland, because they want to actually create their own country and a piece of contested territory. So that's certainly the most ambitious. However, the one that I think has the best legs and is the one that I'm personally, if I had to pick, one of the startup societies on stage today and live in one, I would pick Fort Galt, because Fort Galt is sort of this attempt at creating a very large makerspace in Chile, but this makerspace isn't going to be temporary, it's going to be permanent. So you're going to have people who are living there full time and so forth. And Chile is one of the freest countries in the world. A gay married couple can legally defend pot plants with guns. So, and I think it's the 6th or the 7th best for an economic freedom. It's one of the top for freedom of speech. It's a culture that is, not gonna try to oppress me. So, I'd pick Chile, Fort Galt.
Now, this conference focuses on some very libertarian ideals. Do all startup societies have to have libertarian ideals, or can they venture away from that and have their own ideas?
So, I personally am a libertarian, and I know that many people who are involved are libertarian, and libertarians are going to be naturally attracted to startup societies because libertarians believe in personal autonomy and startup societies believe in societal autonomy. However, In fact, if you look at most separatist movements, most groups who are currently trying to create their own nations would be on the far left. Catalonia, Scotland, Quebec. In fact, we have a lot of supporters right now who are based in Quebec, and that's a possible location for a future conference. So I actually am a complete supporter of communists, socialists, whatever. If ever, as long as you want to create your own society and have a way of opting out, that's no problem.
Okay. Well, it's been a very great talk. How can people learn more about the startup societies, and what's a message you have for them before we go?
So, if you want to help startup societies, all you have to do is Google startup societies, and you'll be able to find our website, our social media, and so forth. We're extremely accessible. You can contact us. We'll usually reply within a day or two. And we love to get in contact with the community out there to reach out. We have tons of conferences. If you have a possible location for a free venue or anything like that, please get in contact with me. Thank you very much.
All right, Thibault Serlet with the Startup Societies Organization. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for joining us here on Bold Future News.
Thank you very much.
Hope to have you back sometime. And I've been Remington Hernandez, and this is Bold Future News. For more information, like our Facebook page, facebook.com/boldfuturenews, and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/boldfuturenews.
Au revoir.
See you later.